Believe it or not, construction on the studio started almost a year ago in August of 2020, and now it's July 2021. At the end of the last video update on the studio, the building was more or less complete, but there was nothing inside, so I had experimented a lot with different ideas for how I would set up the interior of the building. Now eventually I landed on this as a general concept for how I wanted it to look. But then for those that don't know yet, I was rushing out to meet the mailman one day with some boxes that were going out, and I tripped and fell. And what's not really clear in the video is that I bent my hand backwards in a way that overextended all the muscles in my arm. And for about a week, I couldn't move anything in my arm without extreme pain. And over the course of the next 2 months, I eventually regained 100% use of my arm. But then to make matters worse, I also got a nasty spider bite, probably a brown recluse, on my knee, and it's right in the very spot that you would rest on if you were trying to get down on your hands and knees. It actually looked a bit worse, but in this photo it's already on the mend. Anyway, the trouble was, between my knee and my arm, I was very disabled for about 2 months when it came to doing construction. So I had asked one of the guys that helped build my studio building if he could buy the wood and cut out the pieces for my workbench, and all I provided him were the general dimensions and a sketch file. Of course, as you can see, the drawing doesn't actually show any of the structural support of this workbench, so it was sort of left up to his imagination as to how the rest of it would be designed. The corner desk came out pretty well. I was totally satisfied with the design there, and it screws to the wall on both sides, making it very sturdy. And you may notice I'm using self-stick floor tiles for the top surfaces. Now that's sort of a signature 8-bit guy design at this point. Not only was my old studio bench made this way, but so is my computer desk in my office room, which I also did a video about years ago. And I still like the results, so I'm keeping with that tradition. But there were some serious issues with the design of the larger workbench, as you can see here. I mean, it would be fine for any sort of compressive strength on those blocks, but I was afraid the bench wouldn't hold up to any shearing forces, like a person leaning on the desk. So I try not to blame the guy too much, as I didn't really give him any specific instructions on how it would be held together. Again, looking at the drawing he was going from, there was a lot left to the imagination. So once I was ready to start assembling, I had regained partial use of my arm, and I decided to make some design changes. But I wasn't in a position to redo the whole thing from scratch. Now, I didn't get much footage of the assembly because I was barely able to work as it was, and I certainly didn't want to deal with recording it all. But some of the things I did to strengthen it was to use these brackets on all of the posts, and then I added this vertical piece of MDF in the middle to help with that shearing force that I mentioned. And I did the same over at the wall, and I also screwed the MDF into the studs of the wall, so it's pretty sturdy now. But you may have noticed this metal edge, and this is something new for me to try. As for the old bench, you can see I used aluminum flat bar around the edges, but I decided to go a different route this time. I bought this stainless steel strapping. Now, this is the sort of thing you might use to hold together a big crate for shipping, and I had to use a metal cutting saw to cut the pieces out I needed. Of course, that leaves an ugly looking end like this, so I followed it down. Then I drilled holes at a repeating interval, like so. And then, as you can see, I just used tiny screws to screw it into the edge of the bench. Of course, Pig Bunny had to come out and give the new desk her seal of approval before I could finish work on it. My wife helped me with the painting, and I decided to stick with the Vic 20 color scheme for the workbenches as well. She also helped me with the carpet installation, and I again decided to go with carpet tiles for a number of reasons. One thing is that I think it's easier to install, especially when dealing with the strange shapes I need to work around, but also I can pull a piece up and replace it if it gets worn or damaged. At the same time, I was also in the middle of tearing down the old studio room in the house. Now, my wife was looking forward to proclaiming this space to be hers, but this also added a lot of pressure on me to get the new studio room functional enough to start making videos in there. Now, one crucial element was to get some sound dampening going, so I installed these foam squares on the ceiling. However, unlike the old studio, I went with white foam here. This way it wouldn't absorb so much light. And while the foam did help, it still wasn't enough. The first video I filmed in the new studio was the episode on machine language, and I only briefly showed myself talking there, and the audio still had an echo to it. So I've been having to use an echo removal tool during post-production to clean it up some. I also made this little video at the time giving a tour of the progress. Alright, so let's come have a tour inside. Okay, so here we are in the first little room. Now this room I haven't done anything with. It's pretty much bare. It's still a big echo chamber in here. I haven't put any carpet or any sound insulation on the ceiling. So I've got like a little workbench set up over here that I've used for, you know, cutting some wood and stuff like that, because I don't really mind if I get like some sawdust in the floor or something like that, because it's still all concrete floor in here. This is just temporary. This is going to go later. I've also got a little temporary desk set up over here with a computer that's hooked up to the network. Again, all of this is going to change at some point or another. This room will be completely redone. But let's go look at the room that's mostly done, which is the studio. Okay. So here we go. This is the new studio. You can tell the sound is much better in here, although I'm actually not done with the sound deadening in here yet, so the sound should eventually be even a little bit cleaner, but it definitely sounds way better than the other room. So this room is mostly done. I've got my workbench set up here. As you can see, I got another workbench behind me. I don't have anything on the walls yet. It's all pretty bare. I haven't even quite decided what I'm going to put back there, but I actually have a whole other workbench back here that I never had before, which is pretty cool. And then this workbench here is like, I don't know, twice, maybe 3 times bigger than the workbench I had before. So this is going to make things, it's going to make life a lot easier for some of the work that I've been doing. Unfortunately, at this point, further work on the studio was stalled because of the blizzard that we had and the subsequent flooding of my house. By the way, here's some footage of the actual studio building during that storm. This was the day before the power went out. One thing I will say though, I was impressed with the performance of the heat pumps, as it was keeping it a nice 72 degrees inside. But this is when I went into the studio to turn them off, since ERCOT was asking people to conserve power. Of course, after the flood, we filled the garage with furniture from the house and then also filled up the studio. And this is the only video I have, but it actually ended up a lot more crammed with junk than this. Many people have been asking about my house, and so just to follow up with that a little here, so after cutting the bottom of the drywall out of every room, the crew brought out an industrial dehumidifier to run for a few days. And by the way, if you want to see the culprit, it was this shark bite fitting on one of the pipes that broke. I also took this opportunity to replace any old work boxes I was using for Ethernet jacks with new work boxes that attached directly to the studs. Eventually, the new drywall was added to the bottom of the walls, and the usual tape and bedding, followed by matching texture. Then paint, and eventually new flooring. And of course, now we're all moved back in for the most part, but that caused a 3-month delay in finishing the studio. I did manage to get the primary studio room cleaned out during that time and managed to make a few videos in there, such as this one on America's Electronic Stores, where I introduced the temporary vinyl background that everyone hated. And I also did Petsky Robots Part 3, and the Apple monitor that was found in the landfill, and the Laser 128 documentary. But over the last month, I finally got to work on the second room. Now, as you can see, my original plan was to build 2 additional workbenches in this room, and part of the reason for this layout is that this area here has to be available as a walkway to the next room over, so it only makes sense to have a sort of floating workbench in the middle of the room that I can access both sides to it. However, I changed my mind along the way and decided to make a desk instead, and I sketched up this design, and I thought it was pretty innovative because it has shelves all around that I can use while simultaneously giving me space for my legs underneath if I'm sitting in a chair. And so I went over to my brother's shop and got to work building it. I didn't really get a lot of footage of the build process since I was in a rush to get this done, but here it is, mostly assembled at the shop, and then Mike helped me transport it home to the studio building. Now, at this point, it's already reassembled and screwed into the wall and glued to the concrete floor. Much like the studio room, this desk is a permanent fixture of this room. And here it is after the floor tiles are added to the top. Here it is painted, metal strapping added, and more or less finished, along with the carpet installed around it. And now it's time to remove the vinyl from the wall that everyone hates. Okay, so now that the wall is white again, hopefully this illustrates why I need something darker on the wall, because the camera is always going to underexpose my face and my body. Now it's time to start installing these sound deadening hexagons. They say hexagons are the bestigons. Well, it's time to find out. Now, originally I had wanted to do some sort of random pattern like this with a variety of shades of blue, but it was proving difficult finding these sorts of colors. So I had the idea to use this fabric dye, and if it worked, I'd buy some other colors. The trouble is the dye was expensive, and one can manage to do about 3 hexagons. So That was just going to be too expensive. So I settled for these three colors, 2 shades of blue and a light gray. And I used liquid nails to apply these to the wall as well. Now originally I tried hot glue, but by the time I got the bead all the way around, the first part was already solidifying. And here we go. I really had no idea how this was going to look, but I was sort of committed at this point. It looked kind of neat, but I was afraid that gray was just going to be too bright, and too much contrast was what everybody was complaining about before. So before the glue dried, I pulled the gray ones back off the wall and scraped away all of the glue. And then I ordered these black tiles instead, but they ended up being more of an ash gray than actually black. Nevertheless, I went ahead and used them, and hoped it would turn out okay. This process actually went pretty quickly, except for some of the weird shapes that I had to cut out. That's really what took the longest. And one of the last things I needed to do was install this UV blocking window tint, because obviously I don't want the sun turning any of my old electronics yellow while they're in the studio, and at the same time it helps block some of that Texas summer heat out of there. And the final touch, of course, was some mini blinds to cover that up with. Okay, so let's go have a tour of the finished building. Enter my parlor. Okay, so this is what I'm calling Studio Room 2. I will be doing some filming in here, but this is not the primary place where I film. This is where I will come to work and do other things when I'm not filming. This little interesting background piece here is just some leftover hexagons I had from the other room, and I didn't have enough to do the whole wall. And I just came up with this funny little pattern here. I hope it's not like trademarked or copyrighted by somebody. But anyway, I thought it looked kind of cool. It's almost like the nuclear symbol or something like that. But it adds a little bit more sound deadening to this room. I did get the ceiling sound deadened as well, at least with some of the foam I had left over. So this room doesn't sound nearly as bad as it did just a few months ago. So yeah, the desk is all finished. I've got my cabinets up here to store some stuff. So I did want to show you one little piece of irony. So if you look under the desk here, you can see that I've got power, and I actually had to cut out a little spot in the desk just for that electrical socket. But I put Ethernet all around this building, and I thought I'm going to have Ethernet on every wall. And it's not because I need Ethernet on every wall, it's just that I never really know where I'm going to need it, so I just put it on every wall. That way I'll have it where I need it. Well, it turns out this was the only wall in the entire building I forgot to put Ethernet on, and this is the main wall where I actually needed it. So I have to grab my Ethernet from over here, which is a little bit annoying, aesthetically speaking. Yeah, there's just a big irony there that I've got so much Ethernet around the building that's not even used, and I didn't have it right where I needed it. And over here I've got a sofa, so I can relax. And if I've got a guest over, I've got somewhere to sit, and it's just like a little place to hang out. And over here, of course, got my new blinds in. I put my Planet X3 vinyl record and my million subscriber plaque here. I used to have this in the studio where it was in view all the time, but I don't think it really goes well in front of the hexagons, and everybody's seen it already, so it's not like it needs to be in camera view all the time. So I just left it in here. But anyway, let's come look at the main studio. And so here we are. Now I will say that I'm filming this with a wide angle lens, so everything might look just a little bit distorted, but the reality is there's no way to get all of this on a standard lens. But the room is not huge, but it's like so much bigger and so much more space than I had before. This workbench here is 2.5, almost 3 times bigger than my old workbench. And what's funny is when people came over to the old studio, they would always walk in and go, "Wow, it looks so much bigger on YouTube," because the old studio bench was like really, really small, but it just never looked that way in video. This is the size of the bench that everybody thought I had in the old studio, but this one is actually much, much bigger. So I want to show you a couple of things. So one of my fans actually suggested this idea. See, I've got this metal strip around the studio bench, and somebody said, "Hey David, you should ground that. Because that way when you're working on static sensitive devices and you're always touching the bench, you're going to discharge yourself if you have like a static electricity." And I thought, well, that's a good idea, except for one problem. There are certain things I'd be working on I don't want to be grounded. Like what if I'm working on a CRT or a power supply or something like that, and I don't want to risk getting myself electrocuted. So I actually put a little switch down here, and you can flip this switch off if you don't want to be grounded and flip it on if you do want to be grounded. The wire actually comes up into this little power strip, and I'll show you a little video right quick of how that was actually made. After taking it apart, I drilled a hole in the side of the power strip and inserted the ground wire. Now, this is one of those fancy ones with USB power, hence the circuit board inside. Anyway, I just ran the wire over and soldered it to the ground plate. Then closed it back up, and after mounting it to the wall, I attached the other side of the metal strip, like so. So, of course, I've got this door. This room is a little bit more sound deadened than the other rooms, so when I'm filming in here, I do actually close this door. I don't know if you'll be able to hear the difference with the audio equipment we're using right now, but it does actually dampen the sound by like another 20-25% when I close that door. Yeah, so this shelf is just full of a lot of the normal stuff that I need during the process of doing a lot of my projects, whether it just be glass cleaner, this is fake Windex, or alcohol, baking soda, all that kind of stuff. I've got handy various different kinds of tools, pliers, screwdrivers, soldering iron, all that kind of stuff. Over here, I've got a lot of these are all discs with for my games that I make. I try to keep a number of them on hand and ready to go, and then of course I also try to keep a number of boxes actually assembled and ready to go. That way when orders come in, people don't have to wait for them. Well, that's the ideal circumstance. Unfortunately, sometimes I still get behind, but anyway, so that's what I keep back here. So people are always asking me why I have this styrofoam head in the room. Every time I get a visitor over there, always want to know about that. So so I have to film all this stuff by myself. So what I do is when I get ready to set the camera up and I need to frame the image and focus it, I just put this guy here, or girl, whatever it is, because it's the same height as me. And that way I can step away, fix the camera, and then come over here and then move it out of the way before I film. And that is just one of the realities of having to do everything as a one-man show. But a lot of people also ask what this is. So this is a Zoom H4n, and it's not recording right now because I'm using a lapel mic. But typically in most videos, this is where my voice is coming from when I'm talking to the camera. Now, of course, I have a different microphone I use for when I'm narrating, but if you see my face in the video, most likely this is where the audio is coming from. It's always right out of shot, so when the camera is facing the way, it just goes, the frame is just right underneath that, so you never actually see it. Okay, and here we are. This is essentially the final look of the studio using my typical recording techniques that I use, and well, what do I think about these hexagons? Well, I'm going to be honest. They don't look like what I had imagined in my head. Do I like them? Yeah, I do. Probably not as much as I thought I was going to like them. But I think they're going to work, and hopefully they'll grow on me, and hopefully they'll grow on you. I'm sure everybody's going to comment in the comment section what they think about them, so I guess we'll see when this video goes live. That being said, I'd like to say that the studio is finished, but I mean, I think it's going to be an ongoing evolution over the period of the next several years, so I'm sure there will be changes, and I might do some kind of update eventually showing you some of the things that have changed, but for the most part, it's finished, and I can finally divert my attention more back to just getting the videos done, which is obviously what the whole purpose of this building is. In fact, one of the next videos coming up is going to be this guy. So this is a original Apple One. Well, it's not original. It's a replica of an original Apple One. And I have here in this box all the chips that I've been collecting for it, which are really hard to find. And I have here a Deadening keyboard that I bought, which is kind of the right era. So I'm hoping to build a fully working Apple One replica, and not the modern Apple ones that are based on like microcontrollers and stuff, but a real Apple One, right? So anyway, that's what's going to be coming up next. I've already had a couple, or actually I've already had like several visitors to the studio since it was finished. This last weekend, like there was a whole bunch of people that wanted to come by. Yeah, it's starting to feel real now. Like this is like really my place where I work now, rather than where I was before. But anyway, enough rambling. I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. As always, thanks for watching.